And so let's just talk about privilege for a second. I know when we talk about privilege, a lot of people get kind of uptight because you look at privilege as something that, is diminishing everything that you work for. And like, I think all of us, have some sort of prejudiceness about us. And prejudiceness is not the same thing as racism. Prejudiceness is just you prejudging something a lot of times, right? Or you kind of bias towards something. So think about it like this. So put yourself in the shoes of picking a basketball team, right? You have three people to choose from. You have a guy who is 6'8". You have a female who is roughly about 5'2", and then you have another guy who's about 5'8", right? The goal is to pick a basketball team. Typically, which one of these people would you pick first? So, not knowing anything about any of them, you don't know what type of background they had. You don't know if any of these people have any experience in anything, right? So, the first thing that you would do is picking a person to play on your basketball team. Out of these people, the 6'8" guy, the 5'2" female, or the 5'8" male, which one would you pick to be on your basketball team first? And I think for many of us, our first pick would be the 6'8" person, even if we've never seen this person play basketball a day in his life. We don't know if he's good with a basketball. We don't know if he's able to, that he even understands the game. We don't know if he has two left feet for real. Your mind typically goes to picking the 6'8" guy. And then so let's switch it up and say you are looking for somebody to be a running back on your football team. And so out of these people, which one would you pick? Would you pick the 6'8" guy? Would you pick the 5'8" guy? Or would you pick the 5'2" female? And so most of our minds would probably go to the 5'8" guy to be a running back, a shorter guy, probably a little more stout, and you would pick him to be the running back. And then let's switch it up and say, you have a newborn baby that, you have to care for, and you have to go to work, but you need to leave your kid with either of these three people, right? And so typically your mind would go to the female because a lot of times you equate the female with being a nurturer, a mother. And so all I'm saying is in these situations, none of these people ask to be who they are. And depending on the situation that you are in or they are in, um, one case or another, for one reason or another, it allows them to have some sort of a privilege. So, with your mind and the way that your mind works, you would be biased toward the 6'8" guy to play basketball. You would be biased toward the 5'8" guy to be the running back. And then you would also be biased toward the female to be a mother or a nurturer, right? And so none of those people have to have experience. None of those people ask to be, the female didn't ask to be a female. The 6'8" guy didn't ask to be 6'8". The 5'8" guy didn't ask to be 5'8". But when you look at them, you give them a privilege that, they didn't ask for, right? So now let's take it to the case of the part that a lot of people struggle with the black and white bias, especially in America. So when you think of America, America is built up typically of more white people than it is any other race, right? And so for America, as we know the history with America, whether people try to delete it and overlook it and act like it didn't exist, we know the history of America, right? And so for America, America has always painted the black people as bad, as villains, as you see it in a lot of different things. So like when we talk about good and bad, you look at white, as being good, and then you look at black as being bad. And so when it comes to you having to make a choice, right? We're going back to the privilege. So when America has had a history of treating black people in a more demeaning way, right? And just in a straight way of disrespect, hateful, all of these types of things, and have drawn black people out to be criminals and, just no good, right? And you have to pick between which one is good, which one is bad. going with those same biases, it wouldn't change up because of how we talked about the basketball player, we talked about the nurturer, we talked about the football player. It wouldn't change up because those biases would still be there. So, when it comes to, say, two people putting in an application at a job and you have to choose between which one would be good. So, think about either the white person or the black person, and you in a country where black people have been shown to be bad. Which one would your mind typically go to be the good or the bad, or to be the hireable one or the non-hireable one? So when you look at these types of things, like, neither one of these people asked, nobody asked to be black, nobody asked to be white, right? But at the same time, you still have a privilege based on where you are. So if you are in America, the privilege would go more toward the white person. But if you are in a place like Africa or something like this, I think the bias would lean more toward a black person. And so I think we have to understand what privilege is. It's not saying that you haven't worked for stuff. It's not saying that you haven't put in the work. But in a lot of cases, you can get some of the things that you have done can get overlooked before another person's stuff can get overlooked, because a lot of times when you take a white person and a black person, both of these people have come from, you know, uh, early drug uses in their past, right? Even though the white person could have used harder drugs than the black person, the white person, the things that they've done in their past can get overlooked so much because it's like, hey, we've all been there before, we've all, experimented and stuff. And then you can have a black person who has maybe just tried a lighter drug, or, just had some misguidance in his life early in his life, but has overcome it. Most biases would not just excuse the black person's upbringing before it excuse the white person's upbringing. I think sometimes, when we are in a place who has drawn a picture of black being bad and white being good, I think your bias when you have to pick who is who, I think would more so go toward, the white person probably just being good and well meaning, and the black person, mischievous, into criminal activity and stuff. And I think those are the ways that we can see the biases. And so when we talk about privilege and white privilege, for instance, white privilege, there's, in more corporate America, more, mainstream America, white people have a bigger privilege. But when you turn on things of like sports and music and dancing and different stuff like this, I think you're biased just because, not saying white people can't do those types of things, but I think your bias goes more toward what you've been taught, and black people have the rhythm, black people have the athletic ability and stuff, and that's not always the case. But just based on privilege, on what you've already seen, your mind goes to selecting one or the other. And so that's just really what I wanted to just kind of explain about that. Anyway, yeah, like, so just giving you an illustration of where I'm coming from with it, and I hope it makes sense. And so if you think this video is helpful, go ahead and share it, like it. Also subscribe to the channel. And again, I'm Damien, and until the next video, I'm out. Peace.